everybody. Hope you're having a good start to your week. In America, this is a major holiday, but we're here for you anyway. So today I have a very special guest. Most of you probably know who he is. He's a pretty popular guy, and I'm talking about Mike Philippov, guitar practice expert. Welcome, Mike.
Hello, Tom Hess. Hello, everybody. Great to be here.
Well, great to have you here. So, Mike, what I wanted to talk to you about today is how to stay motivated to practice guitar. So, Mike, I know that you know, or I assume you do, that sometimes we feel more motivated to grab our guitar and practice it and focus on what we're supposed to, what we want to do to achieve, ourselves better guitar playing skills. And other times, maybe we just pick it up and we don't really focus on practicing. We'll kind of just goof around and bang around the guitar and play songs. And then other times, we don't pick it up at all. And then it kind of sits in the corner collecting dust. And then, you know how that goes. So, people's motivations go up and goes down. And I know that you train, a lot of guitar players from around the world on how to practice effectively so that they improve their playing fast. Now, most guitar players and students, they have periods where they don't feel very motivated to practice guitar. And I've been there myself. I know how it is. So first, I wanted to ask Mike, why, in your experience with the guitar players that you train, why does this happen to people? And then later I'll ask you, how do you help people? How do you train them to stay motivated? But for now, let's just talk about what are the causes what are the causes that create so many people to sort of lose motivation from time to time. Can you speak to that?
Sure. Yes, of course. So motivation is kind of a funny thing. Everybody throws that term around, and I think many people misunderstand it by thinking that motivation is something external, like you either have it or you don't have it, or you lose it, like you lose your car keys and then you find them again and then you have it again. But I actually think motivation is basically 100% internal, whether it's in terms of practicing guitar. It's either something you just want to do, practice, or you don't want to do, and then you don't practice. So it all starts and ends with you. And that's the first thing I would say as far as motivation in general. But to answer your question specifically, why do people lose motivation? I think the biggest reason is they just feel powerless in terms of their ability to make their playing better when they do practice. So if you practice and you put in the effort to improve your playing, but you're not seeing any results, you're not getting any better, or you feel like your playing is actually going backwards, which sometimes can happen when you're, especially when you're fixing bad habits and things like this. Nobody wants to feel that way, right? Nobody wants to put in the work and spend the time, take the time away from their family and other hobbies and so on, and have nothing to show for it. So because of that, people then find reasons or justifications for why they lost motivation or why life gets in the way or whatever it is. But in reality, we always make time for things that we both like to do and things that we feel we're going to be good at doing, like where the time invested is going to give us the return on that time. So feeling powerless or like really not knowing what you're doing when you practice is a big motivation killer for sure. The other thing is misunderstanding the general process of how practicing works and how skills get developed. There is something I teach that I call retroactive progress. So there's different types of progress you make as a guitar player. There's things that are like instant, where let's say I show you how to hold the pick better, and all of a sudden you're picking a little bit faster. That's like an instant type of thing. Then there is linear progress, where let's say you're learning music theory, for example, and you're understanding a certain concept better, you're working to apply it, you're writing some riffs with it, whatever the case is, you're gradually getting better with that particular area of playing. But then there is retroactive progress, and this often happens when you are changing something fundamental, let's say in your approach to playing, like you're something deeply rooted in your technique. And what happens is, for a period of time, your playing actually goes backwards. And the reason why that often happens is because you are having to think a lot more about what you're doing. So you're not able to play at the speeds you once could play at. And so that causes your playing to temporarily decline, but not understanding that that is completely normal kills many people's motivation, because they think, I'm putting all this effort in, but not only am I not getting better, I'm actually going backwards in my playing. Well, that sucks. Who wants to do that? And so that kills motivation for a lot of people. This not understanding how the process of practicing works. And another big killer of desire to practice, or motivation, whatever you want to call it, is incorrectly comparing yourself to other guitar players. So everybody knows you're not supposed to compare yourself to other people, but everybody still does it, right? We all still do it. But if you're going to do it, you might as well do it correctly. And so what I mean by that is, you don't want to compare other people's best playing to your most mediocre playing. What I mean by that is, if you go to YouTube and you see somebody nail, like, I don't know, a cover solo, Ingves, like covering like Ingves solo or something like that, they play it flawlessly, and then you see the result of that, you see the snapshot of their awesome playing. Then you go back to your bedroom or wherever you practice, and you are playing not at that level. And so you're comparing your mistakes and your mediocre playing and all the challenges you have to a snapshot of somebody's playing, not even realizing that they may have done, 150 takes and chosen the best one to put on YouTube. You don't see the other 149 takes, you see the best one. So this flawed comparison is also going to make it seem like, wow, there's such an uphill battle that you've got to fight to get to where you want to be as a guitar player. It's not even worth it to practice. So those are big reasons, I think, why people lose motivation. What do you think, Tom Hess, in your experience? Because I know you also teach, hundreds and hundreds of students. How do you feel about what I just said?
Yeah, first I agree with what you're saying. I wanted to actually touch on something that you mentioned in the middle about what you call retroactive. What do you call it?
Retroactive progress, yeah.
Progress, right? So this is something that we see when, for example, when we run one of my training events that you're a trainer at, and you and I, with a few other trainers, are there training, 100, 200 guitar players at a time. Thinking about Total Guitar Mastery, the event we ran last year. Um, that event is specific to guitar technique and getting people's techniques to develop really fast in a very short period of time. They fly in or drive in from wherever they live in part of the world. They come in for 6 days, and on day one they're at whatever level that they're at, and they took their whole life to get to that level. So if we're talking about something speed, say, and maybe they're playing something at 140 beats per minute on the metronome, and it took their whole life to get there. And we make the promise that, hey, by day 6 you're going to be here, right? So you might be playing at 180 or 190 or even 200 beats per minute on day 6 when you walk out the door to go home. Well, what happens very often, most of the time, is that on day number 1, when they come in, that first 8 hours that you and I are training them, many of those people, their playing is actually going down, right? It's exactly what you're talking about. Because what happens is when they come in, we see immediately, just by observing them, and it only takes a few seconds usually to see this, flaws in techniques, whether it's the picking hand or the fretting hand, or something with, the synchronization of the hands, how they're holding their guitar. It could be anything like that. So that we're making adjustments, because we're like literally standing in front of them, coaching them and training them as they're going through the motions of the things we're training them to do. And what happens is they need to make these changes. If they actually they go down. They were at 140 when they walked in the door. By lunchtime, they're at like 90, or 100. They're like down here. And sometimes, and I know you've seen it, occasionally with they're there. They're like, oh man, I'm not sure this is working. Huh? You wait till tomorrow lunchtime and you'll see. When you're at 150, you'll see. But the point is, in that period, while they're looking to correct habits or develop a new technique or whatever it is, they're going down. And it can really mess with people's heads. They start feeling like, oh man, I suck. I'm not as good as, the other guys in the room or whatever. and they get discouraged right away. So, I mean, in those situations, we can deal with that because we're like literally hanging out with them all day. So when we see that, and it's easy to see it on people's faces, and we know if they've gone down on, the first few hours, we go over and talk to them and, reassure that, hey, dude, this is normal at this point in the process, but by tomorrow or in 3 days' time, you're going to be shooting for the moon here. And you're going to be, your biggest problem you're going to have is containing your excitement, because you're so excited about the new skills and speed you've got. But the point is that when people are on their own, who are not, being trained by us at the event, they're at home by themselves. They don't have anyone to sort of coach them through the process to say, hey, dude, this is normal for what it is that you're doing today. But if you stay on this track and do it right, do it the right way, you're going to take off like crazy. But they've got to get through that, that valley there to then come up on the other side and start taking off. And as you mentioned, if they do that, they will improve. But it's that period when they're down here. That's when the transformation is happening in terms of what they're playing that takes them up here. This is not really the point at which they've gotten better. This is just where we see it. But when this change made down here, that's where the transformation comes. And a lot of people, they miss that. They don't want to go through that. It makes them feel dumb or bad, or that they're screwing it up, or whatever, and they don't make it. This is what happens when people teach themselves, or they don't have a really good teacher, is there's no one there to coach them through that, and it's an easy way to lose motivation. There's some other thoughts here on causes. I noticed that and I noticed this in myself in the past, when I would take a break, whether I was on vacation or just busy with other stuff, and I took a break from guitar, days or a couple of weeks or whatever. um, there's a snowball effect that happens to people. As I said, it's happened to me in the past too, where first, because you've taken a break, that you haven't been playing, and it immediately starts affecting your mindset. I think you start thinking, almost feeling bad or guilty that you haven't been playing. So you're already starting with your attitude a little bit lower than where you were before you took that break. Then you've got the calluses, right? These calluses that hopefully are hard as a rock when you're playing all the time. And then now they're not, right? They've softened up. You've had, 15 showers between the last time you played and now, and all that water and the lack of friction from playing. This is all putting it soft. So you go to bend the string and, it's harder to bend. It's not in tune, because when you play all the time, you don't really even need to listen to your bends anymore. You know exactly how it feels to be, in half step or whole step. You can just do it by feel. You're like, yep, I'm going to be in tune every time because I know exactly how that feels, how much tension to put on the string. But when the calluses are not there, or they are softer, it now requires more power to bend the string to the same amount, and you can't do it by feel anymore. So bends don't sound as good. The intonation is off. Vibrato is not as good. Sliding is not as good. Those things, because the calluses have started to wear away, it makes anything that is related to a bend or vibrato or a slide or tapping, if you're into that, or phrasing, all that gets worse. So you happens, and that gets into your mindset. And you start thinking, oh man, I suck. My playing is not good. This doesn't sound good. It doesn't feel good. It decreases the motivation even more. I mean, it shrinks even more. Then, because you haven't been playing, your fretting hand gets fatigued fairly easily. Right. So you might go, you pick up your guitar, you're playing some licks or solo or a song or some scales or whatever, and you go for like 60 seconds, and you're playing reasonably fast stuff, and then all of a sudden you're tired already, at a point where you normally wouldn't be tired there. So this endurance goes away very quickly. That now gets into your head. Oh man, I suck. This is not good. Even now, you want to put it down even more. Then your two-hand synchronization has deteriorated. Your timing is probably not as good. All that gets back into your head, and it's like, put this down. I'm going to try tomorrow, and it all of that is makes you feel negative about what you're doing, and it just decreases motivation. So, I mean, of course, taking a break isn't the only thing that can cause someone to feel less motivated, but it's a common place where you really can feel it. Other people, they take a break and they can't wait to pick up their guitar, but they can't help but notice that their skills aren't where they were before. So I think those things add to lack of motivation at some times. I think the best I see in the chat, Joe Lou writes, "Don't shower." Yeah, for 15 days. I'm not sure that would be such a good idea, but it is funny. Anyway, so taking breaks can be, a little bit bad for the attitude and the mindset. Just is all part of the process. Just go back, rebuild the calluses. That's priority one. Rebuild the calluses. Don't try and play fast stuff. Don't try and do complicated stuff. Don't practice a lot because you don't have the endurance of the calluses anyway. Rebuild the calluses. Step one. That's the first thing that I do. I was in for a couple of weeks, and I was back for a week, and then I took a road trip around the United States for another couple of weeks, and my cal I didn't even play the week between, so I had like 5 weeks. I mean, I had nothing left. It was a nightmare. So, but of course, I know from experience, got to rebuild the calluses, and then the rest will take care of itself. But if you pick it up thinking, I just want to pick up where I left off, well, you can't, and then you feel bad about it, and that just destroys everything. So, anything else you want to add to the causes thing, Mike, before we move on?
I think you nailed it pretty well. I would also want to just say one thing, that what you were describing is what most people, like you said, they don't see that because they just see snapshots. When they compare themselves to other people, they don't understand that what you just said, everybody goes through that. It's not just, the ordinary guy who is not like John Petrucci or whatever. Petrucci has the same problem. And Ingve, Andy James, Jeff Loomis, you name it. Everybody goes through everything what Tom has just described. So it's completely normal. It's part of the game.
Yeah. So and everybody does go through. Even professional musicians that, we can just sit here and play guitar all day if we wanted to. I mean, you still go through it because, if you're recording an album and you're mixing, and if you're involved in the mixing 12 hours a day or whatever, you're not playing your guitar. So there's all kinds of reasons why that could occur. You might not be playing. So Mike, maybe now that we've gone through some of the common causes here, how do you help the players that you train stay motivated? So we know the causes. Now what might you say to them? What might you ask them to do, or tell them to do, or train them to do? How do you fix it for them?
Okay. One of the things I try to do is to preempt the loss of motivation as much as possible in a big way by doing everything that you and I have just talked about. So everything you just said about the calluses thing, when you take a break, and everything I was talking about for common causes of motivation, comparing yourself to other people in the wrong way, I try to anticipate when my students are either about to do that or catch them the moment they start doing that, or basically preempt that as early as possible and tell them, okay, here's what you're going through right now, or the retroactive progress thing. Here's what you can expect. And just know that when this happens, it's exactly what is supposed to happen. And preemption is a huge part of how I help my students. The other thing that I do is I try to coach them to take all the emotion out of it, which may sound a little bit counterproductive because people think motivation, especially people who are like into hyping themselves up and like the external motivation and watching motivational videos and posters and memes or whatever the case is. I don't like that stuff because emotion can be your enemy when you're practicing. So it's not like you're hyping yourself to practice like you're hyping yourself for a 1 rep max bench press or something where emotion can help you. When you're struggling to do something and you can lose motivation to practice because you think, well, what I'm doing is not working, so this sucks. Let me put the guitar down. Maybe I'll come back to it tomorrow or not or whatever. I just try to tell my students to just think your way through whatever is going on right now. So let's say you're practicing some inside picking lick and the picking motion is not right and it's sloppy or whatever. I say, okay, well, just think, what is your pick supposed to be doing in this moment? Okay, it's supposed to be doing X, Y, and Z. All right, what is actually happening in your hand right now? Oh, it's actually doing, D, E, and F. Oh, so what should we do now to fix this? Well, we got to slow down and work on refining that. And so this is just I'm trying to walk them through it in as calm and rational way as I can. And what happens a lot of the times is they see for themselves, oh, this is why what I was doing wasn't working before. Now this other way is way better. It's way easier. And that's where the internal excitement that I was talking about earlier, that's when that comes in. That's the true motivation, if you will, that you want, because that is the excitement that's going to carry you through and make you keep practicing. Now you feel like you have the power to affect changes in your playing, which is really what good practicing is about. So taking the external emotion out of it and walking people through the process is a big thing that I do.
Yeah, good stuff there. One of the things that I agree with you, but I'm going to say the exact opposite. It's going to
Okay.
sound like a contradiction, but it's not. Um, the part about taking the emotion out of it, I would actually say put the emotion into it, back into it, but not in this. Not it doesn't contradict what you're saying. What you're saying is, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what you're saying is just get down to the work. Don't feel negatively about, you took a break or something is frustrating. Just analyze what has to be done. Don't beat yourself up because progress is slower than you would like, or it's a little harder than you thought, or it's taking longer. In that sense, take the emotion out. And I agree totally. What I tell them to do, and I know that you know this, Mike, is to try to connect emotionally to what they're practicing. So, for example, I teach a live class every Monday night for my online students. And one of the things that I often say there is, whatever it is that I'm teaching them to do or training them to do, is I'll often remind them to feel the emotion of what it is that they're playing, even if what they're playing is um, something that doesn't naturally have a lot of emotion in it. Just a scale up and down, or something mechanical, where it's just a small little fragment of some larger. But to really try to feel and experience the emotion of it, because I find that the more I can get someone to feel the musical emotion that's there, even if you're repeating the same little thing over and over again, the more into it you're going to be, the more likely you're going to pay attention to what's actually happening, the more observant you're going to be, the more the more you're going to avoid that your mind goes on autopilot and starts your hands go on autopilot and your mind starts thinking about something else, and you're not focused on what you're doing, how it sounds, how it feels. So the more that I think that people can connect um, emotionally to what they're practicing. And again, even if it's a small little fragment of something, an incomplete piece of something, the easier it is to keep motivation up. Because, if we think about when we started playing guitar, or why we are guitar players, why we continue to play, it's for some emotional reason, right? We wouldn't put in the time and the effort and spend the money taking lessons, going to training events, or doing, being in your program, Mike, or whatever it is. You wouldn't do all that unless unless you're able to extract a feeling that you get by playing, by improving, by learning, by being a better player. So it's the feeling that we're after, right? We spend the time, we spend the energy and the effort, and spend the money because we're trying to get feeling, emotion out of all this work that's being done, or all the money that's being spent, or all the time that's being invested. So I try to get people to focus on that. And then also, and I did this at our training events this year. There was a couple of photographs from past events of guitar players playing at my events, where you could see on their face the emotion just pouring out of them. You see it on their face, their whole body language, they're completely into it. And I made a point several times in the event that I had for training other guitar teachers. We had an event there on me teaching teachers how to teach guitar. Uh, and I pointed to those pictures and I said, guys, talking to the teachers now, do you see these pictures of these students? Look at their faces. That, what you're seeing in those images, that's what you want your students to feel when they're playing or practicing. And they don't have to be advanced players in order to get that feeling. But you have to try, as teachers, try to get those students to feel something. Otherwise, it can get a little mechanical. And the feeling, which is nothing wrong with mechanics, we need that piece for sure. But if the emotion is gone totally from the enjoyment of the process, it's going to be hard to maintain that because we're not robots. So that's the first thing. The second thing that I'll say is that people sometimes forget what actually inspires them. So when I was a kid, when I first heard Yngwie Malmsteen for the first time, this probably would have been 1988 or so, maybe 89. When I first heard that, of course, like completely blown away, and it's amazing and stuff, of course. But that inspired me, even though I was, nowhere even in the same universe as a player at that time. But it completely inspired me. So even today, a much better player than I was, back in the late 80s. But even today, when I see players that inspire me, whether it's Malmsteen or Becker or whoever it is, doesn't even matter. It inspires me to want to pick up the guitar and play. I don't sit there and think, and I never did, even as a teenager or a kid, I never thought that guy's so much better than me, I just want to quit. I hear people say that sometimes. Like, why would you want to quit because someone's better than you? That makes no sense. Why wouldn't you aspire to practice to be more like that, to have skills like that? So that's something that always inspires me, is to go back to thinking when I was a kid, wanting to play guitar, what was I listening to that made me want to play? And I go back and listen to that. I listened to a lot of Metallica when I was a teenager. Metallica doesn't really inspire me today to want to pick up my guitar and play. That's not what my inspiration would be. But I still, if Ride the Lightning or Master of Puppets comes on, those albums, I can't help remember that inspiration being in my teenage years. So it does make me want to play, even though if I would have heard it for the first time today, it wouldn't have had that effect on me. But I remember that. And that's the point. Whatever it is for you meaning the people listening here, whatever it was that made you want to play guitar in the first place, that made you really want to advance, to take lessons, to practice, to improve, or to play in a band, or whatever it is that you do, remember what that was and go experience it again. It might be going to a concert, it might just be watching a video, playing the favorite songs on the albums or whatever. So that's the second thing. And the third thing
Yeah.
is, oh, go ahead. Do you want to say something to that, Mike?
Yeah, real quick. I think I agree 100% with what you said. And I think we're talking about both the opposite sides of the same coin, if you will. So the way you're describing emotion and putting the emotion into it is harnessing the positive emotion that makes you want to play and practice and improve and be better. Agreed 100% about that. What I was talking about is how to protect yourself from the negative emotion that makes you want to put it down. Well, that's what I meant when I said take the emotion out of it and be more methodical and rational. But I think both of the things, what I said, what you said, work together 100%.
Yeah, no, I totally, 100%. I knew that's where you were going. I just wanted to try and clarify, and I'm glad you did again, because people listening may not understand that we are talking about the same. Emotion is power. Okay, there's a lot of power in emotion, and what Mike is describing was there's here. Anyone seen Star Wars? The Force. Okay, the dark side of the Force and the good side of the whatever, right? So Mike's describing the dark side of the Force. Don't go down the path of the dark side. Okay, and I'm describing the positive side of the Force, right? That's, use a kind of a cheesy Star Wars analogy. That's what we're basically saying here. That the emotions are powerful, and they can, when the emotions are negative, they can push you into being demotivated. So you want to avoid that. That's what Mike is saying. And I'm saying that emotions are powerful, just like Mike said, implied. But on the positive side, we want to harness this to extract more motivation out of what we're doing. So yeah, I think we're totally on the same page. We just talked about the two different sides. That's all. One other thing that I hear from students is that if a student, and this is more true for people who have a practice routine, who kind of do practice the same way, meaning from 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock, that's when they practice, or they practice 35 minutes a day or 2 hours a day, whatever it is. When people who have a routine get out of that routine, either temporarily or more than temporarily, sometimes they don't practice at all. So, for example, I've got a student right now who told me last week that he couldn't practice on a particular day for an hour. He always practices for an hour. And he couldn't practice for an hour because he didn't have an hour. He had like a half an hour. So he didn't play at all. He said, I don't even want to pick up my guitar. If I can't go through my whole program, I don't want to go through half of it. I'll just wait till tomorrow. And I was telling him, I said, that's not a good idea. Okay. I'm happy that you have dedicated practice time. That's great. And I'm happy that you're regimented in terms of the program you're going to. That's also fine. Okay. You shouldn't do the same thing every day forever. That wouldn't be fine. But the point is there is a plan. That part's good. But if he can't go through the whole plan for the day, he just says, you know what, screw it. I'll just try again tomorrow. And he doesn't play. That's irrational. And this is a pretty rational person that I'm thinking of here. But it's not productive. It doesn't help to not. If you've only got 15 minutes, pick up the guitar for 15 minutes. If that's all you got. And if you say, I don't even have 15 minutes, I would say, well, unless your wife just had a baby or your house is on fire, your house is on fire, you're lying to yourself. Of course you got 15 minutes. Of course you do. Okay. No new baby, no house on fire. You've got 15 minutes. So use the 15 minutes, pick it up, and do what you can in that time. So anything else you want to add to that in that sense, Mike?
No, I think we covered that pretty well.
Okay. So, Mike, and by the way, we're going to get to questions here live. If you guys have questions, and I know there are some already, go ahead and just put them in the chat, and questions that are relevant to today's topic, not like, hey, can you watch my sweep picking? Okay. Relevant topics of today. We will take as many as we can near the end here. Okay. So stick them in the chat now. But before we get to that, Mike, I wanted to ask you what advice, and I know we've kind of covered some already, but what advice do you for guitar players who are not in your training program, who occasionally struggle, with motivation or focus when they're practicing? What would you say to those people?
Watch my YouTube videos because I talk about this topic actually quite extensively on my YouTube channel, not specifically how to motivate yourself or any of that stuff, but I talk about the mindset challenges and ruts people get into, like the things that Tom Hess, you and I have been talking about for the past 30 minutes that most people don't realize because frankly, nobody ever talks to them about that stuff. Everything from the calluses thing to accurately comparing yourself to other people, if you're going to compare yourself to other people at all the things that can make you lose motivation without you realizing that it's not your fault. There's nothing wrong with you. So all that stuff, I talk about that extensively on my YouTube channel. But in a practical sense, also realize that practicing is a skill. This is something most people don't think about, and I'm going to explain how in a second. Most people think that practicing is, it's just, repeating something you can't do a bunch of times until you hopefully get better at it. And it's something that comes naturally, like, you naturally know to chew your food before you swallow it. But practicing guitar is not that kind of a thing. It's a skill. And the reason I point that out is because the more you understand the ins and outs of how to solve your problems, develop your skills, the more empowerment you feel about your potential as a guitar player, and the more confident you feel that when you practice, you're actually going to get better. And if you combine that, especially with the positive side of emotions that Tom Hess was talking about, if you combine that with sharpening your guitar practice skills, that's when you never have problems with motivation anymore after that point. So those are the two big things I'd recommend.
Yeah, good stuff here. All right, we have some questions here. I'm going to start off with a question on Facebook from Peter. Peter writes, motivation definitely improves the more time you have to practice, or probably if your goal is to become a musician. What happens to those like myself who spend most of the time doing something else? For example, working. I'm a pediatrician and don't have the time to practice and get stuck on a certain level and can't move forward. What can we do to keep motivation getting better? So let me paraphrase this question. So Peter's got a day job, right? He's not a full time musician like most people aren't, and he's got responsibilities and all that stuff, and he can't dedicate all day to this stuff. So how can he keep his motivation up when the time to practice is limited or he feels he's stuck on a certain level?
Okay, I can speak to that. So I think the assumption embedded in this question is that you need a certain amount of time to become a certain level of player, which, I mean, obviously it's true. You're not going to master a guitar in a week or anything like that. But if you think of practicing more like a series of every minute of practice time that you have, let's say it's an hour or 30 minutes or whatever, every one of those minutes is like a step that you take towards the goal that you have. As long as you're going in the right direction, does it even matter how much or how little practice time you've got? I mean, of course, more is always better, but anything is better than nothing in that sense. And that goes back to the point I just made shortly before. I know you probably asked that question before I made that last point. Practicing being a skill. So it sounds like you may be struggling to motivate yourself because you don't feel like the practice you are able to do is effective. So the best thing to do, instead of worrying about how much or how little practice time you have, just look at what you're doing and see how you can improve and get more out of the time you have. I call this maximizing your RPM, your results per minute of practice time. The better you are at that, the faster you're going to improve, of course, and the more motivation you're going to feel. So that would be the main uh, my main advice to you. What would you say, Tom Hess? Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I do. And it's all great stuff what you just said there, Mike. One of the things, Peter, is that you probably have more time than you realize you have. So let me explain what I mean by this. I, Prior to us doing this live stream, I have at 11 o'clock every Monday morning, I have what's called open office hours. And this is a time for all my students, to anyone who wants to, can come talk to me live on video. There's a group of us there, and they can ask any question they want about anything. Okay. And one of the questions that came up just this morning was on this, basically the same topic. And my answer to the student who asked this question was, listen, this is not about time management. It's about managing energy. So the person who asked the question was not asking for himself as a guitar player, although he is a guitar player. He was asking from the sense of a business owner. He's a guitar teacher. He owns a music school. I'm coaching him to make money with his teaching, with his music school, etc. Okay, so he was asking about how do I get more accomplished essentially when I'm doing a lot and I sometimes get tired, sometimes don't feel like it. That was the context. But the answer and the question applies directly to Peter's question. So it's like this. Every person has a time during the day when they have maximum energy, where your brain is fresh, you're able to focus on what it is that you're trying to do, you're able to concentrate, and you're able to think. For some people, that's right in the morning. Some people are morning people, and at 6 a.m., they're sharp as a tack and they're ready to go. At 6 a.m., trust me, I'm still in bed sleeping wonderfully like a baby. Okay. But at 10 a.m., I'm ready to go. 10 a.m., 11 a.m., 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, I'm on like a freight train, complete laser focus. It's really productive time. But when it's, 9 o'clock at night, I'm not that way. I get tired like everybody else. I don't have the same level of energy. But the difference is at 9 o'clock, I don't sit in the chair and watch Netflix and just chill out until 11:30 when I fall asleep or whatever. So what I will do and what I recommend you to do, Peter, and everyone else is know, be aware, when do you have peak energy? When do you have enough energy to do something, but not enough to do the most difficult work or the most concentration? And when do you have even less energy than that, where you're not ready to go to sleep, right? You're not wiped out like I got to hit the bed and go to sleep now, but you have enough energy where maybe you could do something small. Okay. So, Peter, maybe for you, that's 7 p.m. Maybe it's 5 p.m. Maybe it's 9 p.m. I don't know what it is for you. But if it's 9 o'clock at night and you're really too tired to really focus on practicing guitar seriously at that time, that's okay. There's always musically to advance at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, even when you're in bed. So, for example, I I memorized the whole guitar neck in bed, several months to do. But when I was okay, for a long time, I could play guitar. I knew a lot, but I didn't have the fretboard completely memorized. I mean, like instantaneous recall of where everything is. I do now, but I didn't then. And what frustrated me, and maybe Peter, you can relate to this. What frustrated me was I didn't want to take away practice time when I had my guitars and I had the energy. I didn't want to take away all the practice time just to do the exercise of memorizing where everything was on the fretboard. So I made the decision I'm going to do that at night. I'm not going to be playing guitar anyway at 11. Right? I'm going to be laying in bed, trying to fall asleep. And at that point, lights are out, right? You're in bed. I got, 5 minutes or whatever before I'm drift off and I'm gone sleeping. And I'm going to use that time every night to start memorizing where things are. Some nights, maybe I would get 60 seconds into it and that'd be it. And I'd be sleeping. Other nights, it might be 10 minutes. But the point, learn the fingerboard in bed. Okay. And even physical things, little two-string sweeps where you're sweeping extremely fast and the direction changes very quickly. There's a particular two-string arpeggio pattern where each note that you're playing gets repeated as you're sweeping through. The top note is repeated when you come back. Same with the bottom note. Well, that was something that I really struggled with when I could sweep pick for years, but that particular kind of sweep picking was really hard for me to learn. Very hard, actually. And I was working on it for months, and I still wasn't getting it, and it frustrated me. So I decided, what I'm going to do? I'm going to take this to bed. I didn't take my guitar to bed, but I would lay in bed and I would visualize because the problem was mental. The problem was I hadn't yet developed the right neural pathways in my because I wasn't going slow enough visualizing exactly how the hands would move, exactly how it would feel, and I didn't memorize that feeling. So I learned that particular technique in bed away from the guitar. These are true stories. So Peter, these are things that you can do. You can do things away from the guitar. Okay, so when you have time to practice, focus on the things that are most physically, mentally challenging. But when you have less energy, match the energy to the task. So that means that you'll either need to figure out on your own, if you're trying to teach yourself, which things match which energy levels, or you would need to work with someone like Mike or myself or whatever to answer those questions for you. Okay. So you can do it on your own. There's just going to be a whole lot more thinking involved. But the point is, it can be done. And the main principle here, match the energy level to what you could do to advance your skills. So sometimes it's going to require you picking up the guitar. So you might want to do that in the morning before you go to work. Take your guitar to the doctor office or the hospital, wherever you work. Do it at lunch, 15 minutes, whatever. Short little periods of time will do a lot when you start adding them up. All right. Very thank you for that question there, Peter. We got a question here earlier that I wanted to get to, Mike. Let's see. I think the guy's name was Grayson. Here it is. Here it is. Here's Grayson's question. Do you think that motivation is a balance between inspiration and discipline? Example, forcing yourself to push through a practice session when you don't feel inspired to do so. Mike, I was just doing a lot of talking. You want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. Um, I think it's mostly inspiration in the sense that if you're inspired, you play guitar, as Tom Hess was saying earlier, because you want to feel a certain way. You want to play the notes that make you feel the way that you feel when you hear your favorite players play. And so that's where the desire to even pick up the guitar comes from. Then, of course, along the way, you learn that there's stuff you have to do to develop those skills, and then you find problems in your playing along the way. You have to backtrack to fix some bad habits, whatever. But the driving force behind all that is the reason why you're doing it is to get to that end goal, exactly as Tom Hess was talking about earlier. It's that positive side of motivation. So for this particular question, I would actually refer to everything Tom Hess was saying, connecting emotionally to what you're playing. If whenever you practice anything, whether it's slow or fast, or if it's a really fast part that you're practicing slowly, it should feel just as good when you're playing it slow as it does when either you're playing it fast or your favorite guitar player is playing it fast. And if it's not, then you're looking for ways to make it feel that way and make it sound that way. And I can't think of discipline playing a role in that. It's it's like a discovery process where you're looking for finding the ideal motions to make that lick feel easy, or adjusting the phrasing to make it sound like your favorite player or whatever. All of that are positive emotions, or maybe not the best phrase, but I would call it positive emotions, whatever, that pushes you to do it. It's not like somebody standing over you with a whip telling you, no, you got to practice this, 5,000 more times before you can go eat dinner or whatever. So if you feel like you need to discipline yourself to do it, something is wrong. That's that negative emotion I was talking about, where you feel like you have to either get some external motivation by watching some, motivational videos or whatever to get yourself to do it. That kind of motivation doesn't last, and it doesn't make you better. You need to then lean more in the positive direction. So I know it's maybe a little bit of a vague, abstract answer, but it was kind of a vague and abstract question. So it is what it is. Tom Hess, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, and you make a good point about you alluded to it at the end about internal versus external motivation. So external motivation is easy to get and it works, but it works very short term. So external motivation is the stuff like I mentioned earlier. If you go watch, I don't know, if Zach Wild is your favorite guitar player, and you go watch a video of Zach Wild playing live, maybe that inspires you to want to pick up your guitar for that day. Maybe the motivation, the inspiration will last into the next day, but it doesn't last much beyond that. It's a band aid. It's not a cure. So if you have to keep going, I don't know, to YouTube to watch videos every day to get yourself motivated to practice, um, that's not going to push you through. You can't do that all the time. Okay, it's not healthy. It's not very effective. Okay, ultimately, it can work as a temporary thing. Okay, it does work short term, but to really do this, we have to feel it internally. And someone, and I lost it because I've got another question queued up ready to go. Um, Here it is. This is the comment that I was looking for. Um, Love for the instrument and music keeps you motivated. It's a childlike joy in guitar that keeps me playing. Yeah, RW, whoever you are, you're right. You're absolutely right. That's a smart comment. I agree totally. Um, I love guitar. I just love it, and I think to an extent, all of us do kind of, maybe to different amounts. Um, but there are times when I'll be listening to something. I'm at work here, and I'll be listening to music in the background, and there'll be some moment in a song or a solo or something like that that will, or a melody, whatever, that will be playing, and it affects me so much emotionally that I just lose track of what I'm doing, and I go back and I rewind and play it. No, don't technically rewind anymore. There's no more cassettes, but I go back and listen to it again, and it's so awesome. And I'll go back and listen to it again, and I might do it 50 times in a row. And my wife, who's here off camera, to drive her nuts because she's, I knew that you would do that. She knows the parts that come up. She's, I knew that you would get into that loop again. And it's like I almost get into like this trance or something. It's not really a trance, but it's I just love it. Now, most music that exists, I actually dislike. I would rather listen to complete silence than 99.9% of music that exists. I'm a little weird that way. But of the 0.1% of music that I love to such an extreme amount that it's hard to even just talk about it, put it into words how much I love it. And I think that for all of us or all of you, it's good to find something like that. It reminds you how beautiful, how awesome music is. At least whatever your favorite music, your very, very, very favorite, the music that you connect with most emotionally. Um, when you listen to that, it reminds you this is so awesome, and you want to get to the point where you feel that way about the stuff that you play. That when you're playing something and it feels so awesome, and if you don't have that feeling when you play, it's either because you're not connecting enough emotionally to what you're playing, or perhaps you're not focused enough on phrasing. I get, Mike and I, we get a lot of students that they come in and they want to shut up and down on the guitar. They want to play really fast, or they want to learn, 10,000 songs, those kinds of goals. And there's nothing wrong with that. And we train a lot of people to do a lot of that all the time. But I'm always trying to nudge people in the direction of phrasing because that's where all the emotion is. But most people, they don't focus on it. In fact, if you go on my YouTube channel right now and you look at the most recent video that I released, you'll see that it's got about half of the views of all the other videos that I've released in the last, couple of months. Because the last one was about emotion. All the ones that are like, here's how you play it fast, here's the technique stuff, everybody watches that. The best videos, the ones that are about phrasing and extracting emotion out of what you're playing, people don't watch that as much. They don't seek out to learn that. But that's the best stuff. It happens all the time. We put out a video like that, and I know this is my best stuff. This is my best YouTube videos. But it's not the one that everybody wants to go see. Everybody wants to go see the shredding one, the arpeggios one, the sweep picking one. They're all into that, which is okay. It's no problem. I'm happy to help people with that. But being able to play really fast or really cleanly is not going to give you the emotion that you wanted to have when you picked up the guitar the day you first bought one. It's not going to get it to you. It's the emotion it's the phrasing. That's where the emotion really is. That's where it just drips. All right. Let's see. Ron Stein had a question I wanted to get to. Mike, maybe you want to take this one. When you have a practice routine you're working through, how do you keep yourself motivated and keep yourself from feeling overwhelmed when you move on to new material? So, for those who don't know, Ron is a very good student of mine, and of course, Ron gets new material to work on all the time. In addition to the stuff that he already had, maybe it's a feeling of overwhelm at some point. Mike, you want to talk about that one?
Yes, and that's a good question for sure. I think it's important to rotate goals you have in the short term. So, I was reading this book about Navy SEALs, how they go through their careers in the SEAL teams, and they basically, if I remember correctly, hopefully I remember that correctly, they have like basically three phases. One is when they're training, uh, then they have the phase of deployment, and then they have time off. Basically, I think it's like 6 months of each, something like that, in rotation. And so obviously, whatever phase they're in, they're always doing something on maintenance mode, and then something they're like training, developing their skills and fitness and whatever else they do. Then when they're in training, they're in full mode of that. When they're in deployment, they're still doing a little bit of training, but they're mainly doing their mission stuff. And then when they're home, they're still doing a little bit of training, but they're mainly resting. So that's how I often think about rotating priorities when you practice guitar, because sometimes you may not have any particular objective that you're working towards. You may not have any gigs that you're playing. You may not have any like performances or songs you're going to be looking to record or learn. You're just simply in the learning mode where you're a sponge. You're absorbing all the information that, let's say, I know you take lessons from Tom Hess. So you follow your practice routine. You learn a little bit of everything. Then if and when the time comes when you need to switch gears and you need to focus on an upcoming, let's say, gig that you've got coming up, that's going to take priority. So that may take 80% of your practice time. And in that case, it's normal if developing your general skills is going to go on the back burner a little bit, and you work on that maybe just 20 or 30% of your practice time, and accept that while you're preparing, let's say, for your gig, not only is most of your focus going to go into that, but your general skills may decline a little bit because you have to make room in your brain and in your hands to prepare for that thing, that gig, that performance, or that recording session, whatever you've got going on in that moment. And so then when that gig is over, or when that project is completed, then maybe something else comes up, or you go into your general learning mode again, where you're developing all your general skills. So that's how I think about practicing and avoiding overwhelm, keeping in mind that not all of your skills are going to stay at the exact same level at 100% of the time. And especially the better you get as a player, the more true this becomes. When you are a beginner, early, intermediate player, all your skills kind of develop at the same time and at the same pace, and that's kind of normal. But as you become intermediate and more advanced, your skills are going to go like that. Of course, they're gonna trend upwards, kind of like the stock market, but there's gonna be ups and downs. And knowing that is gonna preempt a lot of the overwhelm you might otherwise feel. Because if you don't understand the point I just made, that all your skills are gonna go through cycles, but generally trending upwards, it's easy to beat yourself up. And again, going to why people lose motivation. If you expect all your skills to improve at the same pace and stay at the same level, and that doesn't happen, then you think you're doing something wrong. You just try to do more stuff. Then you try to negatively discipline yourself to do more, and you get overwhelmed and you don't want to practice anymore. But if you just accept that that is normal and rotate your short-term goals, that helps to make a lot of that overwhelmed stuff go away. What do you think about that, Tom Hess? Do you agree, or do you have something to add?
Yep, you're on the right track. Totally agree with that stuff. The one thing that I would just add maybe is you don't have to master things in order to begin to start using it, to apply it, and to start integrating things. Even when they're not mastered, try to integrate them together so that they're useful. And what a lot of people do, and mistake they make, and Ron, I'm not putting you into this category, but it's common among guitar players and among students, is they think in a very linear way where they think, okay, Tom Hess gave me this lesson, so I've got to master this before I can go off and do something else, before I can even look at the next lesson or look at the next part of the lesson. No, that is wrong. Okay, that is not the right approach at all. Okay, you want to master this eventually, not today. Our goal isn't to master this today. Our goal is for you to learn the concept, become generally familiar with it, and then start to use it, start to combine it or integrate it with other techniques or other ideas even before it's mastered. Because if you learn something and then you try to master it, you isolate it, you practice it 5,000 times until it's perfect, you can't use it, you can't be creative with it, you can't combine it with any other thing that you can do or that you know, it's useless. All of those hours of practice time, it's not totally wasted, it's just not usable yet. Because if you literally cannot apply it or can't integrate it, the fact that you've mastered it is completely irrelevant. It doesn't help you. What would help you is that if you could use it, even if it's not totally fast, even if it's not totally clean yet, even if it's not totally smooth, but you can use it. You can combine it with something. You can integrate it with something. Now you have something you can use. And from that point, you seek to master the components. But people get this order backwards. They get it wrong all the time. And one, when you get that wrong, two things happen. First, it takes you much longer to become the player you want to be, much longer and much harder. And number two, the process is never fun. There's nothing fun about being really good at something in isolation, but you cannot use it, or you cannot be creative with it, or you can't put it in a song, or you can't combine it with something else. Or trust me, there is nothing fun about that. What is fun is when you can use it. You know it's not perfect yet, but you're using, you're there, you're making music with it. You're combining it, and then you get better at everything as you go. That's a much more fun way to learn and master guitar. I want to find a comment real quick from Cheryl. Just going to quickly put this on the screen. I want everyone to read this comment. She writes, I also have a physical and emotional reaction to music. Cheryl, this is the number one most important ingredient that I know of to become a great player. If you don't have a reaction, not to all music, but to the most important music to you, your very favorite song, your very favorite melody, your very favorite guitar, if you don't have that emotional connection, it's going to be very, very difficult for you to become a great player, and it's going to become difficult for you to ever enjoy trying to become a great player. So that's a key. I'm glad you mentioned that, Cheryl, because that is the prerequisite to greatness, in my opinion. Because without that, all the mechanics in the world isn't going to get you where you want to go. It'll make you fast. It'll make you impress 14-year-old kids who are watching you on YouTube, but it ends there. That's it. You're done. Okay. So, okay, a couple questions here, Mike, and then we'll wrap this up. Let's see. Here, let me take this one from Facebook first, and then while you're answering, I'll go try and find the other one again. It was a really good one. So, question from Alberto on Facebook: what would you recommend to keep yourself motivated when you are recording a guitar solo or phrasing? Let's say one day you like the solo, but the next time or the next day you don't like it. And sometimes I have this problem regularly. I think what he's talking about is you're improvising or you're writing, you create something, and on the day you created it, you thought it was awesome. And then you go back and listen to it the next day, and you're like, that wasn't that cool. It's just kind of okay. Mike, can you relate to that at all? And if you can, any advice here?
Yes. Actually, it goes both ways, believe it or not. Oftentimes, when you're recording something, you think that you played it really badly. Like you think this sucks because you're in the moment and you are putting all this pressure on yourself. But if you take just a break for like 5 minutes and you listen back to it, then you're like, actually, that was a lot better than I thought the moment I finished playing it. But I know this is not, this is the opposite of what the question is. So if you're recording a solo and you thought it was great, but then the next day you realize that it's not all that hot, try to get clarity on exactly what you don't like about it. And usually, as you already, I think you said this in the question, yeah, it's about the phrasing of the notes. It's not about the notes themselves. The notes oftentimes are kind of irrelevant. I mean, obviously you got to be playing in key. They're relevant in that sense. But there's only 7 notes in the major scale, so there's only so many ways you can combine them. But it's the rhythm and the phrasing that's usually a little bit off. So the articulation of the notes, the vibrato, the string noise that may be muddying up the notes a little bit. Get clear on what is it that you don't like. Is it the string noise? Is it the rhythm of the notes? Is it something in the vibrato? That's going to help you to then recalibrate your next attempt to play the solo better. Otherwise, you're like, oh, this sucks. And if you have no idea what you don't like about it, you're just going to be guessing the next time you play it. Then chances are you will, if it's like a technical issue that you need to fix, like say a string noise or vibrato is not being right, if you don't fix it, you're just going to keep doing it over and over again, and you have no chance of ever making it better. But if you at least take an educated guess from what you don't like about it and try to fix that problem in your next attempt, then you can see, well, does it sound any better or does it still suck? Then at least you will be a little bit more strategic about how you refine it. What do you think, Tom Hess? Do you have
Yeah,
anything to add to that?
Yeah, I do. I have one thing to add. All that stuff that you said, I was going to say also in different words, but basically the
Mhm.
same. But the one thing that I'll add here is that sometimes when, and this happens more when we're improvising than when we're composing, but it can happen in either case. Um, when you're creating, improvising, let's say in particular, when you're playing, you're in a certain state of mind in that moment. Okay. You're feeling whatever it is. Hopefully, you're feeling something. Okay. We know Cheryl does, and I do. Hopefully, you're feeling. All right. So, whatever it is that you're feeling when you're creating, when you go back and listen to it or you play it the next day, if you're in a different state of mind, you're not remembering the emotional aspect of that led to the creation of this, what you were focusing on. Now you're just hearing the results with detached from what you were feeling. So when that happens to me, that tells me that there's a couple of different problems. The first problem, the least likely of the two, is that I'm simply just in the wrong mood the second day. I'm not I'm having a bad day in a bad mood, something like that. So my mindset is far away from the mood I was in when I created it. But the more likely issue here isn't that. It's that you loved the idea of what you played. The idea was good, but it wasn't executed in a way that made the emotion you were trying to express be accurate enough. So let me give you an example of this. If when you listen to a truly great guitar player, okay, create a melody, improvise a solo or whatever, a truly great, truly expressive, highly expressive player will put emotions into you when you listen to it. And not just any emotions, the emotions that that writer, that player wanted you to feel. Okay. Now, you may not know the details of what exactly he was thinking, what the scene that he had in his mind, or who is in this scene. You won't know those details, but you'll have, if the player is good enough, you'll have a strong sense of, you could generally describe the feeling as a listener and be pretty accurate at describing what it was that the composer or the songwriter or the player was trying to express. That's called accuracy of expression. Okay. So, as musicians, when you're writing music or writing songs or solos or improvising melody, you want, for me, my personal opinion, my only goal in music at this point, only goal that I have left, is to be as accurate as possible expressing the emotions I'm trying to express. I could care less about everything else. I don't care about getting faster or getting cleaner or learning more. I don't care about any of that stuff anymore. The only thing that I care about is I have a feeling. I want to express this feeling in a song, in a solo, in whatever. And I want the listener who's paying attention and has any emotions in his or her mind at all to be able to repeat back to me what the feeling is in as much detail as possible and have it be correct. Okay. Now that requires them to listen and pay attention, but it also requires me to be as accurate as I can be in expressing specific emotions. Okay. So the more you focus on this, the more you focus on trying to be as accurate as possible in expressing emotions, the less your question, Alberto, will be an issue. You won't listen to it anymore on the next day and think, oh man, yesterday was awesome. And today it's just like mediocre. If your emotional expression is accurate, it becomes accurate enough, you won't feel that way anymore. Even if on the next day you're in a bad mood, you're not in the same mood you were the day before. The expression is so accurate that when you listen to it, you're going to feel that emotion every single time. For me, this is just my opinion. It doesn't, you all can have a different opinion. That's okay. But for me, that is everything. That is the holy grail. That is the ultimate goals to get to that point and to pursue, to practice, to learn, to train, to practice for that goal. That's my personal goal. It may not be yours, but that's what it is. So Alberto, if that was your goal and you work towards that, I think you will solve this problem forever. The more accurate you get, the more you'll like it just as much as you did the day before, maybe even more so. Okay, Mike, we got time for, I've got time actually for one more, but I'll let you end if you don't mind. If I have one little thing to add, if you don't mention it, but you probably will. If you have 30 minutes a day to train, which is the biggest mistake you might make?
All right. Well, it's kind of hard to narrow it down to just one mistake, but I'll give you a few. So obviously, the most important thing when you practice anything, whether it's 30 minutes or 1 minute, is to practice with your brain engaged. So you don't want to be practicing mindlessly. You want to have a specific goal that you're trying to achieve for those 30 minutes or 5 minutes or 3 hours or whatever. And if you have that, then everything else kind of stems down from that. So set a specific goal you're trying to achieve. And that, by the way, doesn't have to be an outcome. Meaning, it doesn't need to. When I say a goal, I don't necessarily mean that. Oh, I got to get 10 beats per minute faster in the next 30 minutes, because that specific outcome may or may not be realistic in those 30 minutes, given your skill level and a whole bunch of other factors. But it can be simply, okay, I'm going to focus on, like that 2-string sweep arpeggio that Tom Hess was talking about earlier. I'm going to focus on getting really clear on what my pick is supposed to be doing. And once I am clear on that, I'm just going to drill that motion with as much perfection as I possibly can for those 30 minutes. And at the end of those 30 minutes, you may have gotten faster by 10 beats per minute, maybe a lot more, or maybe you haven't. But it's irrelevant, because as long as you've done the right steps, the right process, you have taken steps towards getting better. So as far as what the mistake might be, the biggest mistake you might make is not having that clarity, not having your brain engaged, and not setting a goal. That's kind of three things wrapped up into one. Tom Hess, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, those are all awesome. Those three things are awesome. And I know he asked for one biggest mistake. You gave him three. I'm going to give him a fourth one. And that is that when you are first sitting down to play, you're of course not warmed up yet. Okay. And in order to play at your best, at least physically, mechanically, your hands have to be warmed up. So it's going to take some time for your hands to warm up so that you do the things that you can do at your maximum potential, at least for today. Well, the big mistake that people make warm up process is they go through mindless exercises. The little chromatic thing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 across the neck. Okay. You go through that mindless stuff and your brain is not engaged at all. So most people practice time like this. Okay. I'm going to, I'll draw you a picture real quick. They'll look at it as, here's my practice time. Here's the beginning. Here's the end. And I'm going to spend in 30 minutes, let's say, I may have to spend half of that time, at least in the winter time. It would probably take, maybe in the summer, it'd take less than that. But in the winter time, it's probably going to take half that time just to warm up. So this is all just warming up, okay? Because you're not able to do things at max speed or close to max speed when you're not warmed up yet. So that means that this 30 minutes becomes just 15 minutes of real practice time. This is essentially all waste. This is wasted. But it doesn't have to be wasted. Doesn't have to be. It's just that most people do waste it. So if you had 30 minutes, we could double, as Mike calls it, the RPM, your results per minute. That's Mike's term. We could double your results per minute from 15 to 30 simply by changing what happens over here. Now, we know we've still got to get the hands warmed up. This has to happen no matter what, unless what you're practicing is not physically demanding, okay? It's not fast. It's not complicated. It's not but assuming that it is technical in nature, we need to extract 15 minutes of usefulness over here. Mindless exercises are garbage. They're waste. Okay. They do warm up your hands, but they don't do anything else for you. You're not learning anything. You're not getting better. You're not nothing. You're not advancing anything until after you reach this line. Okay. Then the growth happens over here. So in order to make this useful, we have to, number one, stop doing mindless exercises. No more chromatic 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. None of that garbage. Okay. You need your brain to be completely engaged, turned on, concentrating on what you're doing. Now, we don't need a lot of concentration to play mindless finger exercises, but you might take something like, let's say, a scale sequence of some kind and put it in a key or in a mode or a fingering that is unfamiliar to you, but one that you might want to learn and master at some point. So here's an example. Most people know how to play a sequence of 3 or sequence of 4, a scale sequence, or a sequence of thirds. Those are very common scale sequences. Okay. A lot of people know them. All right. Now, to get benefit out of those scale sequences as a warm-up, which they can serve as a warm-up if you play it slow enough. If we put this in, let's say, the fourth mode of melodic minor, and let's say the fourth mode of melodic minor is not known to you, you don't have this memorized everywhere on the guitar. Now, taking that familiar sequence, the sequence that you know already, and putting it in an unfamiliar key, unfamiliar mode, unfamiliar fingering, now your brain has no choice. It must concentrate. It must think about the sequence in the context of this key or mode that is unfamiliar to you, or not familiar enough for you to play it fast. So what that does is it takes this wasted 15 minutes and it makes it completely productive because you are now learning to master not only the sequence, which you may have had mastered previously, but you may have mastered it in a major scale or a minor scale. Now we're looking to do it under the Lydian dominant scale or a mixed Lydian flat 6, fifth monomelodic minor, or some other key or mode that you would like to be able to use and play and improvise in, but you don't have that totally visualized in your mind yet. Now you've got 30 minutes of absolute growth. So you have doubled, to use Mike's term, you've doubled your RPM, doubled your rhythm per minute. And that I think is one of the biggest mistakes that people make is they warm up for 15 minutes or worse, they don't warm up at all. And now they're completely wasted when they try and just because they can't play their full tempo. They're only getting half of the value out of that 30 minutes. And the shorter the session is, like 30 minutes is not a lot of time. Okay. If you waste the first 15 minutes out of a 2-hour session, okay, you've wasted, what is that, 1/8 of your practice time. It'd be better if you didn't waste 1/8, but 1/8 is not half, right? But if you've got only 30 minutes, 50% of it, that's huge. That is absolutely enormous. So the potential for you to grow as a player is doubled simply by changing how you warm up. And if you want to know more details about how to warm up, I've got a video on my YouTube channel. I forgot what the name is. Just go to the YouTube channel, look at all the videos, and then do a search on the page for warm up. It'll be there. Don't remember the name of the video, but it's the only one that says warm up in it. Okay. But that stuff like that will help you. All right, Mike, I think we're a bit over time, but if I remember correctly, you have a resource that you're sharing with people. Is that correct?
Yes, I do. It's yes, thank you. It's a 1-hour masterclass called, as you can see on the screen, Guitar Progress Accelerators. And these are basically things that boost your RPM, boost your results per minute of practice time without adding to your practice time. So these are not exercises or licks or scales or any of that stuff. These are concepts where once you watch the video, you understand exactly what I'm talking about, how to get more out of the practice time you have, how to stop feeling overwhelmed, how to get more motivation, if you like that term, to practice guitar and get better faster. So doesn't matter how much or how little practice time you've got, these things will really, really help you. And this is free video. So just go to this link, practiceguitarnow.com/progress, and I'll send you the video for free. And that's what it is.
All right, very cool. I also have something for you guys. It is an e-guide called Double Your Guitar Speed While Cutting Your Practice Time in Half. And it's similar in what Mike just offered in terms of helping you to make more progress faster, but the approach that I'm taking here is very different. Stuff is great. It's just different than the kind of stuff I'm going to talk about here. But this is also for free. But it's not, you can't get it on YouTube or something like that. You can only get it through my website, but there's no strings attached. It's totally free. But I've had many, when I say many, I'm talking about thousands of people go through this little e-guide here and massive amounts of improvements all on their own with their guitar speed, all for free. So go to my website, thomas.net/speed, and you can download it right now. Again, no strings attached. And yeah, by this time, tomorrow or a week, you'll be doing things you probably didn't imagine you could be doing on your own. All right. Thank you very much, Mike. It was great, all the stuff that you shared today. Thank you for all the questions and all the comments from everybody. Sorry we didn't get to everyone's question here, but we try to get to as many as we can while also giving answers that are not just, short surface level answers. We try to go deeper in some of these questions. So thank you, everybody, very much. Thank you, Mike. Have a great day, everybody. Have a great rest of your week. Take care, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you, Tom Hess. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.